Tu veux le faire qui? Alexandre me dit mais tu peux le faire. Parce qu'il est Alexandre d'ailleurs. Il est parti. Non, il va peut-être passer.
Dear honorable participant, I'm sorry to say we need to another 2 minutes for technical issues. Please consider us. Only 2 minutes. And I hope within 2 minutes our event will be start. Only 2 minutes.
Yes, it is deep.
Yes.
You're in the right place.
You're keeping well.
Highly diabetic. That resulted into what is called diabetic neuropathy. So the muscle, I have no pain, nothing. The muscles of my hand and leg, they are weak. So as long as the plain ground, I can walk up to 2 kilometers. But a little bit of undulation, I'm lost. So my body cannot take up any lateral load. See, there is a railing, can climb 4 stories. So no railing, not even 2 stories.
So do you do physio?
Surviving. There is no treatment for it.
Physiotherapy?
Take vitamin B complex alone.
Am I audible? Can everybody hear me? Loud. So ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome. Today we are here for this side event as a joint collaboration with our distinguished partners from Refugees International, Hugo Observatory, UPC, UUSC, Sustainable Population Australia, which is being represented by ECO in Uganda, and ISEE. So we are really honored and privileged to have such diverse and impactful coalition among us for contributing to today's discourse. So I just want to share that AOSED has been closely working with the advisory group on climate change and human mobility for the last couple of years. And this group was to share the most available knowledges with UNFCCC parties to provide technical support so that to ensure that the climate, that the human mobility issues are not getting into consideration in global climate negotiations, and also provide technical support here. And we have with us Dr. Ainun Nishat sir as our moderator today. I think he needs no introduction, but his dedication and contribution to development and sustainable and environmental issues is exemplary, and we are truly honored and fortunate to have him among us. And we also are honored to welcome Ms. Anju Sharma from Global Center of Adaptation as a guest speaker. So I think without further ado, I would like to request Sir, Ainun Nishat sir, to begin our session. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum. I am privileged. I thank the organizers to invite me to moderate this session. Now there's a big challenge for me. I think the moderator's job is keep the time. So I will be a timekeeper, and in between two persons speaking, I will add my few words, and we try to finish this session or end this session in time. We started in time, and therefore we will complete in time. I did a little bit of mathematics right now. We have around 90 minutes, and I have 6 interventions. So 10 minutes each, that will be 60 minutes, still have 30 minutes. There could be 20, 25 minutes of comments from the floor or questions from the floor. Now, I'm from Bangladesh, and we cannot ask questions. before we ask a question, we need 5 minutes of narration and what is the question is about. By that time, both the person who is putting up the question, he has forgotten what he wanted to ask. So, having said that, those who are asking question, please fire straight away. Or if you have a comment, say that I have a comment and do that. So that would possibly take 20, 25 minutes. And if there is still 5 minutes, I will utilize that. But in between, I will be talking a lot. Having said that, the topic for today or this session is Action for Forced Climate Displacement, a life cycle approach to intervene at source and destination. Is migration taking place? Is displacement happening? Answer is yes. I can give name of 4 districts of Bangladesh where in last 10, 15 years, population growth has been negative. Where they have gone, they have moved where there is job, they have moved where they have food. Food scarcity, and the main cause of the movement in those particular area, and I'm kind of a victim because my grandparents come from that area. Salinity has gone up because the sea level is increasing. How much, what is the extent up to which sea level has gone up? 25 centimeter, 30 centimeter? And I saw figures as high as 60 centimeter. And the sea level rise, the threat is now being estimated at a higher level. At one point when the climate change discussion started, it was about 3 to 4 meter, 1990. Then it was reduced to 80 centimeter, IPCC 5. Now everybody is confused. If the entire Antarctica melts down, then the sea level rise could be 60, 70 meter. So all island, all low-lying coastal areas would be underwater. Luckily, we are making a commitment that we will not allow the rise of temperature to that level. Then I ask question, what level? 1.5? Answer is no. 1.5 is the, hopefully a target. 2 degrees Celsius, well below 2 degrees, that's the Paris Agreement. Try for 1.5. But IPCC 6 makes a projection. The negative or the worst projection is it could be 3.7 meter. And they say it is possible to keep it within 2.7. And then it could be lowered. Point is, sea level rise possibly would be the major, one of the major drivers of climate change. And then you have, as a result of sea level rise, saline front would move inside the country. There would be more flood. There would be drought. And drought is something we do not recognize when it is happening. You feel that there was drought. After the drought is over, then the experts come and say, hey, why you didn't have the crop? Because you had drought. When it happened in Bangladesh last year and this year, in the peak of monsoon, when you're supposed to have about 1,800 to 1,000 millimeters of rainfall, we had hardly had 1/4 of that. So there's a big crisis going on. Riverbank erosion, coastal erosion, landslides. The urban areas are in real trouble because there will be short duration, heavy rainfall. In one day, you may have 400 millimeters of rainfall. What would happen to my capital city, Dhaka? 80% of the town would be underwater. And who lives in the most vulnerable area? Poor of the poor, poor of the poorest of the poor. And obviously they will have to maybe temporarily go somewhere, or, again, this temporary business and permanent business is a funny thing. IOM defines somebody moving out for 6 months and he comes back is not a movement, is not displacement. If he goes out and stays outside for more than 6 months, then it is permanent migration. So there are lots of issues with definition. There are lots of issues with science. And science is now in a crossroad. The chair of COP28, he has loudly said there is no science by which it can be shown that 1.5 is achievable. The scientists do not agree. We do not agree. If we take special steps, go for nature-based solution, go for afforestation. If you can go for 3 trillion trees, you can sequester carbon to the more interesting level. So I would stop here I kept 5 minutes for me at the end of the session, which I have utilized now. I'm being clever because I don't know, I will not be able to control these powerful gentlemen. So let me open up the discussion. We'd like to hear what should be the approaches, what are the approaches possible, so that the people who are moving out and where they are moving out, they are getting settled over there. My good friend Salimul Haq used to work on this topic, and he had carried out under his supervision migration from the southwestern part of Bangladesh, from the area where my parents' forefathers come, to another place called Mongla area. So his one of the worry was how to assess, and when the people move out, is a very funny thing, is that able-bodied people move out. Younger, older, and women, they stay back with the hope funds, money would be coming to them, and they suffer unattended. Government, as of today, is confused what to do. Government of Bangladesh, I'm from Bangladesh, they recognize the migration is a possibility, but they don't know what to do. Maybe if some big shots are here, maybe they can pick up the ideas, what can be done before they are forced to move out, and when they are forced to move out to some location, how to settle them and give a safe livelihood. So with this as introductory points, let me invite Dr. François Gemene. Is my pronunciation correct?
More or less.
More or less, okay.
I'll forgive you.
And he will be talking on how climate change will affect migration pattern to and fro from European cities. And he is involved in a project called ActionAid, and he will highlight their funding. Sir.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to all of you in attendance and the tens of thousands watching online. It is my pleasure to address this side event, recognizing obviously the linkages between climate change and migration. And in order to actually tackle more precisely what is being discussed in the negotiation right now, I'd like to say a few words first about a major project that we are currently running with the EU Observatory at the University of Liège, which is the Habitable project. As you know, the negotiations this week are not only about the phasing out or down of fossil fuels, but also very much about adaptation. And I think that one of the headway of this COP has been to recognize that adaptation was not just a matter of funding and big money, but was also a matter of what had to be done. And there were negotiations, there still are negotiations, about whether or not we need a global framework for adaptation or whether adaptation should be left to each of the parties. The point I want to address with this project is the fact that when we discuss the role that migration can play for adaptation, very often we tend to dismiss the way climate impacts are perceived by local populations. We design adaptation programs on the basis of climate models and projections. We design adaptation programs, we sometimes fund them and implement them as well, on the basis of what we perceive as an objective reality. Yet, research shows that there are wide discrepancies between the way the impacts of climate change materialize in reality and the way people perceive these impacts. And obviously, when it comes about the migration decision, this decision is most often made on the basis of what people perceive on climate change than on the basis of how climate change actually materializes. And this is the reason why Habitable exists. As you can see, it is a rather large consortium associating 22 partners, not only from Europe, even though it is funded by the European Commission, but also from Africa and Asia as well, with a focus on 5 countries, which are Kenya, Ethiopia, Mali, Ghana, and Thailand. And on the next slide, you will see the consortium. I don't know who's running the slide. On the next slide, please.
Which one?
What can be done?
Doesn't work.
Small piece of advice, if you have only 8 minutes speaking time, I advise everyone to drop the slides. Anyhow, we don't seem to be seeing the next slides, which is not a big issue. Because the point that I wanted to make with this habitable project is that it is innovative in the fact that unlike other projects documenting the climate migration nexus that sought primarily to try and see how people migrated, we really look at the macro level and try and see how the migration decision is being made. And for this, we look at different dimensions, including obviously the impacts of climate change themselves, but most importantly, the way they are perceived, and we develop a set of innovative techniques which are about literally showing how these impacts are being perceived by local populations. We also consider, next slide please.
Does it work? This
View of the consortium.
Anyhow, what we are trying to find out is how people define the habitability of the place. That is, when do people consider that the threshold of inhabitability has been reached? And therefore, rather than focusing on big numbers, we focus on the household level. And we do that not only with longitudinal surveys, but also with qualitative methods, including some innovative methods such as fuzzy cognitive mapping, which allow people really to visualize how they perceive the situation, how they perceive their aspirations, their goals, and the obstacles to these goals. And an important dimension of the project is that we suggest that there is a strong element of non-linearity in the way that the social changes are associated with climate impacts. And very often, when discussing these social changes, and in particular migration, we assume that there is a direct relationship between the magnitude of the climate impact and the magnitude of the associated migration. We assume very often, for example, that if you go from +2 to +4 degrees, then you double the size of the migration associated with that. We contend in the Habitable Project that this is not the case, and that actually the relationship between climate impacts and social changes is a non-linear relationship, and that at times you will reach a threshold which we have conceptualized as a social tipping point when basically some adaptive capacities of the community are reached, and therefore that induces a social transformation, which can be migration, which can also be, of course, another kind of social transformation. But really, what is important here is that,
is working.
this is a fantastic tool. So what is important, and you see here how this social tipping point is conceptualized on the screen, what you can see is that obviously there is no uniform understanding of this social tipping point. And this social tipping point will be at different places depending on the context. What is crucial is to understand the role of social perceptions in the way these social tipping points will actually materialize. We believe this is of primary importance for the negotiations on adaptation, and that if you try and have a kind of global framework for adaptation, that can be one thing, but it is essential to recognize that how a social tipping point will materialize locally is highly dependent on the local context, and more than on the local context, on the characteristics of the people concerned. This is important in the way we will manage not only adaptation, but also migration policies. Increasingly, a lot of people, at least in Europe, and this is where the connection is with our other project called ActionAid, increasingly, a lot of people perceive that climate change is likely to induce a mass migration into Europe or Western countries. And for the first time, at least to the best of my knowledge, a panel of about 20,000 people have been polled on this and on their willingness to welcome people displaced by climate change. And interestingly, there are huge discrepancies in the way that populations are willing to welcome or not people displaced by climate change. I'm sorry I have not translated this into English, but this is easy to understand. There are countries where a majority of the population is willing to welcome a large number of migrants. This is Brazil, Egypt, these three countries, the United Arab Emirates, Nigeria, or Saudi Arabia, the big neighbor. But there are also countries where the population is not willing to welcome a large number of people displaced by climate change. And in the bottom of the table, we actually see a lot of European countries, France and Belgium, Japan, Germany, Poland, as well as Japan, Singapore, Poland, and Turkey. And I think that it is very important to understand this, how do you put it, this subjective dimension of migration in order to move away from a very deterministic framework that we often have on migration and that is likely to induce the idea that we will be facing a migration crisis in the years to come. And obviously countries react very differently to this prospect. And the way people react is deeply dependent on the situation of migration in public debates and in their country. Finally, to wrap up, Mr. Chair, as I realize I'm now out of my time, I think it is crucially important that we incorporate this dimension on migration and displacement in the draft text of the stocktaking of the Paris Agreement. Very clearly, this is one fundamental dimension of climate change that has to be included in the text, whether it is in the segment on adaptation or in the segment on loss and damage. And if some negotiators are in the room, I really want to urge them to consider including this language on migration and displacement, which will be a very powerful lever to develop adaptation and migration policies on this basis. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Sorry I've been over time.
Thank you. I know that Dr. Gemene has a lot of experience. He has been a lead author of IPCC 6 and director of Hugo Observatory. So I'm sorry, I had to indicate that your time is up very politely so that we can see you. I'm just trying to disturb you. Let's now invite Dr. Annelise Dupont. Is the pronunciation correct? Okay. And she will be talking about similar thing, the migration and people who are migrate, etc.
Thank you very much. Also, thanks for having me on this great panel. I just wanted to share with you some insights from our acronym project. Yes, that's a project whose acronym is actually acronym. Our project is conducted under the leadership of the Institute for Central Europe in Bratislava. And it seeks to understand how climate change will affect patterns of migration to and from European cities. Indeed, when we discuss the climate migration nexus, the discussion is often centered on the global south. Clearly, there's where most migration flows will happen, and we will hear in a moment from our colleagues how this can be addressed. Yet, this is also a concern for cities in Europe. Here's why. So let me first address migration to European cities. In Europe, migration is highly concentrated in cities. And this is clearly where most migrants live. There is often an assumption that migrants to Europe only comes for economic or political reasons. Yet, we know that climate impacts will also affect the political and economic drivers of migration. Last year, in France, among the top 5 countries of origin of asylum seekers, there were 2 countries on the front line of climate change, Pakistan and Bangladesh. Somehow, the French are convinced that their country will face a migration crisis in the coming years. Using the same pool as François mentioned moments ago, almost 80% of French are convinced that their country will face a migration crisis as a result of climate change. And if we take a global view on this, we notice that the concern for a migration crisis in countries is higher, in countries where the volumes of migration are already high. That's the case of Turkey or Egypt, for example. Doesn't work anymore. Sure. This is the reason why urban policies for the climate need to go hand in hand with policies for migration and integration. Many of the levers that cities can activate to adapt climate impacts or to curb their greenhouse gas emissions have direct implication for integration policies. In many cities, migrant neighborhoods are often poorly connected to the city center or located in places that are more exposed to the impacts of climate change. Therefore, at the urban level, it is crucially important to articulate policies that target climate change and those that promote migrants' integrations. But concerns also include immigration from European cities for climate reasons. In France, 1 person out of 4 believes she will have to migrate in the next 10 years as a result of climate change. In India, that percentage reaches 2/3 of the population, and the world average is 35%. Indeed, as European cities will face harsh impacts of climate change, including heat waves and floods, and as remote work has become a common pattern since COVID-19, it is likely that European cities will experience waves of outmigration. So I see 2 consequences to this. First, such outmigration is likely to affect urban fabric dramatically. Over the past decades, we have witnessed a continuous trend in urbanization. We cannot rule out that climate impacts combined with new work habits and rising housing prices will put an end to this trend in Europe. Second, this might signal a change in the way we perceive migration. For years, European citizens have considered that migration was a thing of the global south. People from elsewhere coming to their place, and therefore migration policies were considered as a policy that would apply to others than themselves. Now that they imagine that they too could be migrants, will that change the way they look at migration policies? This is what the acronym project will seek to find out. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. I appreciate that you made very pertinent observation. You noted which are the countries who would be receiving more migrants from the South countries and others. And it's a complex problem because it is difficult to differentiate between economic migrants and climate change migrants. But if you start observing what is happening, maybe that will help the world to find out solution how to manage it. This is where we are. Thank you very much. Let me now invite the next speaker, Isaac Kobongo, and he will talk about his experience of Uganda, where refugees are coming in, and there is environmental degradation and resource degradation. So,
thank you.
Please.
I couldn't be on the panel because there are limited seats, so we have to look for innovative ways of adapting. So, I'm Isaac Kabongo. I work with an NGO in Uganda called the Ecological Christian Organization. We work with our partner, Sustainable Population Australia, and other colleagues from Uganda Biodiversity Trust Fund, Nature Uganda, Wildlife Conservation Society, and then ECHO. We are currently responding or having interventions in Uganda, and as you could be aware that Uganda is one of the countries that host the largest number of refugees, not only in the world, but also the biggest host on the African continent. We host over 1.5 million refugees. And I'm sorry I didn't put the map of Uganda. We are both in very unique ecosystems. We are in the Great Lakes region of Africa, but also we are in the Horn of Africa. Now, those two regions do have very unique circumstances. When you talk about the Great Lakes region, you can't avoid talking about the issue of conflict, mainly because of the Congo Basin, but also you are aware that the River Nile also comes from that region. And therefore, we are facing quite a number of challenges. On one hand, climate-related challenges, and then on the other hand, conflict or military-related. So the displacement which are being caused in that region are as a result of those two factors: climate change, induced migration, as well as conflict. Right now, as I talk, the rebels in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, they are advancing, and a number of people are being displaced, and they are crossing from DRC Congo to Uganda. As I talk now, if you Google, you will be able to see conflict is going on. At the same time, as you are aware that the Horn of Africa right now, we are experiencing floods. And as floods happen, we are moving, actually we were in, we had prolonged droughts. So we are moving from droughts against floods. So moving from one challenge to another. And now that's the situation on ground. So all that combined with support from the European Union, we got support from the European Union to be able to reduce, to respond to the challenges, specifically in Uganda, where, of course, we have the biggest refugee camps in the region. And as I mentioned, when you look at the way we survive in Uganda, our livelihoods are really based on ecosystems. And according to World Bank and FAO, in their research in 2020, we lost about 64,000 hectares in a period between 2014 to 2018. 64,000 hectares. That's a lot of, area. When you bring in this aspect of refugees, of course, refugees are the other part of it is that they are not interested in conservation because all the time they think they are either going back or they're on the move. So when you tell them to plant trees or to think about conservation, it becomes a very big challenge. The project is aimed at addressing the impacts of rapid population growth, which is actually also combined in two ways, because rapid population growth due to the migration from other countries, but also rapid population growth because Uganda is one of those countries where the fertility rates are really very high. So it's more than 3.5 fertility rates per annum, the population growth for the country. We are in a small country, but we are about 45, 46 million. Again, when you put on the pressure from the external migration, I mean, the situation just worsens. So the project had two components. One component was mainly really focusing on the mitigation part of it. And as I mentioned, majority of the communities depend on the ecosystems for livelihood, for agriculture, for firewood, for survival. Of course, you would ask me a question, why would you go into mitigation kind of things and don't think about the resilience? So we also focused on building resilience through livelihoods, but naturally, because communities depend on their ecosystems to survive or to thrive, we felt it logical to find ways of restoring those degraded ecosystems, to be able to get at least water, be able to get the firewood, be able to get, because they depend on them. They are not based on services that they would be able to sell their goods and services to get a living. And so the interventions we are having there is basically to protect those ecosystems, the wetland ecosystem, the forest ecosystem, but at the same time being able to make sure that we empower the men and women in those areas to be able to start enterprises that would help them be able to improve their livelihood. So beekeeping is one of those things which we were looking at because of forestry, but at the same time, of course, you can't protect wetlands without demarcating them and making sure that you create the boundary between the communities and where they are living. We have set up demonstration gardens, but also woodlots, and you'll find that actually many refugees in the refugee camps, they have food, but they don't have firewood to cook. And the ministry, our ministry of Office of the Prime Minister, which is responsible for overseeing refugee operation in the country, recently published a report where we are spending a lot of money, US dollars, on providing firewood for the refugees to be able to cook. So the investment in the cooking itself is higher than even the money would give them for food. So that's how the situation is on the ground. And this is because the ecosystem where they are mainly in areas where they are off the grid, the national grid. And these areas, they cannot be able to get to improve the cook stoves, because even when they have the improved cook stoves, they will need either charcoal or briquettes, and therefore it becomes very complicated for them to be able to use them. Of course, we are also working with other civil society organizations, community-based organizations, the private sector, and the other relevant institutions to be able to advance this work. And lastly, there is this challenge where we say that actually we discovered that both the host communities but also the refugees themselves, every day naturally reproductive health is taking place. Reproductive system or whatever is people are producing, and therefore the high population growth in the area exacerbates the challenge. And as you are aware that this is also an issue of human rights, even if you are a refugee, you have the right to produce. But again, it complicates the whole challenge, and therefore the issue of population dynamics comes in. And we discovered that because of that, we are trying to integrate population aspects and mainly making sure that those who are interested in accessing family planning services are able to access them voluntarily, and we are able to link them to such facilities. And therefore, this challenge, in a way, we should be able to basically, we couldn't just sit and say, yeah, it's a big challenge, and therefore we can't do much. I thank you, and basically that's what we are doing. Thank you so much.
Mr. Isaac Kabangor has given his experience, what is happening in the field. From Bangladesh, I agree with all the observation, because we have about 1.2 million refugees coming from Myanmar, and we don't know when they're going to go. So when you talk about sustainable livelihood for them, we have big problem with the government and the refugees who have come in, because the government would not allow them to take a job, help them settle down. But your last point is very interesting, family planning. Now in Bangladesh, we see the refugees get support from the UNHCR and other UN agencies and bilateral and various NGO who are supporting the refugees. So far, so good. But this is given on per capita basis. How many persons are there in the household? So if there is one more mouth to feed after 1 year, they get rice and few other things. Same quantum is given for whether it's a 1-year-old child or 80-year-old person. So the refugees think more babies means more income for them, more food they get it. And the destruction of ecosystem and forest and other areas are same thing what we are observing. Thank you very much. We have now Mr. Qiyamuddin Ikram.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm grateful to the Refugees International for supporting me to participate at COP. And also I would like to share my experience from Afghanistan perspective, a nation that has been ignoring for the last 3 years at COPs. This year we also don't have any delegation and representation from the country. Afghanistan is also one of the countries most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. We know that we have decades of conflicts, and these conflicts have already eroded the coping capacity and adaptive capacity of the Afghan communities to withstand with the effects of climate change. But again, climate change further exacerbating these vulnerabilities of the communities. We are experiencing different climate disasters. This year, we are also facing drought conditions, and these climate disasters are, in terms of frequency, or in terms of severity and intensity, they're more as compared to the past decades. We are now consecutively facing the drought condition for the last 3 years. We are also facing floods across the countries, and at the same time, there are lots of internal displacements happening right now. So it means that climate change is not like it is undeniable reality for Afghanistan, and they're not like occasional incidents. We are facing, they are having constantly influencing every aspects of the life. Afghanistan is one of the agriculture country where we have more than 80% of the people dependent on either directly or indirectly dependent on agriculture or livestock. Climate change and climate-related disaster have been influencing their livelihoods, and definitely then people will be internally displacing. They have two options: whether they are displacing towards nearby urban centers, which are already in their fragile settings. They have limited resources. They don't have proper resources for sanitation, for accommodation, for shelter, food, etc. Coming to urban centers, they will put extra pressure on the existing resources, and they will fight, and there will be resource-based conflicts for their jobs, employments, and the existing resources for shelter, sanitation, etc. So their vulnerability will further increase. Or they have a second option for their displacement, whether they should go to another country to cross the border, to cross the country's border, where they will face another legal issues and protection issues. Again, they will also struggling with finding another, like employment opportunities, racism, etc., etc. But at the same time, they will also facing protection issues. I am one of the refugees, and I have this experience that how a refugee, when you go outside of your country, you will face a lot of problems. Currently, Afghanistan is only receiving the humanitarian crisis. Currently, Afghanistan is also facing humanitarian crisis. Almost 2/3 of Afghanistan are urgently requiring the humanitarian assistance. But we should acknowledge that humanitarian crisis is not enough. We should build local resilience. So therefore, to address the current issues of climate changes and climate disasters, we should also include local resilience with the long-term solutions. Therefore, I'm always, based on my experience, with the current situation, the international communities and UN organizations, they are not working with the current de facto government. But what I'm experiencing, we should work with the local people, because I think when you are working with the local communities, you should give them a sense of ownership. They will be more active. You should utilize your local resources. There should be more adaptability and flexibility. And that's how what I'm now saying, that we should also invest in the early warning system, the community early warning system, because the local farmer doesn't have any information about any climate risk and impacts. So we should invest in early warning system. We should also invest in disaster risk preparedness, because I think if we are only focusing on a humanitarian response, so I think this is not the solution. We must acknowledge that we should invest also in the prevention and the preparedness phases as well, if we want to address the climate change issues effectively. And that's how why local resilience is appropriate in this context, because of the local context, because they understand much better. That is also cost effective because of the local resources. And at the end, I will also highlight why inclusion of displaced people and refugees should be part of the decision-making and policy formulation, because they are the forefront of the climate crisis. they know and understand the challenges, and they also know what they need. They not only in their local, like I'm also telling that they should be involved in the local resilience building, but also there should be a space for refugees and displaced people here at COP and high level events, because they understand the local challenges. They should tell the challenges, and also they will understand what they need. So I think that will give a better solutions for effective climate solutions. Refugees are also marginalized communities, and their voices are always unheard. We have refugees here in COP as well, but maybe they don't have any chance to reflect on their own challenges. And I think if you give a chance to the refugees to be here, to speak, I think that will give that will give a chance for them to advocate for their rights and for their needs. Also, if we empower refugees to participate in COPs and high-level events of climate change, we give them a sense of agency and ownership over their future, so they will find some good solutions for their future. We should also have some platform for their stories to be heard here at the high level. That is also a message to the public, that they should understand that if we don't act for climate changes, we should be having more challenges in the future. At the end, I will just give a message. I have 3 messages. One is just for to involve local people in building resilience along with long-term solutions for each and every country. But I'm speaking on behalf of Afghanistan, which is a political instability, facing political instability and complex situation right now. At the same time, I'm also giving a message that include refugees and displaced people in the high-level events of the COPs. At the end, I am also giving a message that Afghanistan should be part of COP in the upcoming COP, because Afghanistan is not part of COP for the last 3 years. And I'm here just to share a little bit of experience and to reflect of Afghanistan here with some of you. I think you might not heard about Afghanistan in other events, but I think this is a good opportunity for me just to reflect on Afghanistan. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Qiyamuddin Ikram. I mean, we do not know much about the problem of Afghanistan, but in recent days, I think, when government of Pakistan ordered the Afghan refugees to go back to their homeland after maybe 10, 15, 20 years, is a very peculiar situation. Once they were uprooted from Afghanistan, they came to Quetta or Islamabad and other areas. Now they are being forced to go back without any preparation. There is nobody welcoming them. There is no assurance of a safe livelihood when they go back. Of course, they didn't have proper livelihood opportunities when they were staying in Pakistan. I don't know how they managed. But on a very, very lighter tone, I know they learned how to play cricket, and they're beating all the countries who claim very strong to be in cricket, including Uganda. Anyway, let me move on to the next speaker. May I have Mr. Shamim Arfeen? He will talk about actions for forced climate displacement, a life cycle approach to intervene at source and at destination, which is a good idea. Mr. Arfeen, you have the floor.
Thank you, Honorable Moderator, speakers, and participants. Good evening. Actually, I am not expert as well as not academician. I'm a grassroots people. So I would like to share some my experience, which I gather from last 2 decades field activities. Whatsoever. We know about the climate change, so we don't need to talk about the climate change. And we know about the causes also. There is a lot of causes, but Honorable Moderator earlier says that now again we need to ask some global leader and chair also on COP told that, state that in the formal meeting the 1.5 degrees is not possible as per science. And most of the people said that. So, but reality is that we know climate change has 2 criteria, one of the natural phenomena and one of the human made. So human intervention climate change is a very important issue to address for us. Because there is 2 types of human intervention, one for saving of lives and another for make more money for profit. We say profit. There is unlimited profit. But we need to consider what will be addressed for save our soul as well as our one globe, human rights, and everything. And agriculture for food, we know it's a very important issue for the life, education, house, and transportation, and very essential industrial also. But how many profit we need? The leader, I don't know about this. But reality is that now we are in the trap in the last few decades, at least last 2 decades, we also facing this problem also. So I need to discuss another thing. We know about the climate impact. This impact is sea level rise and temperature, and which already talk about the temperature. But I need to compare the contribution of the climate change. Actually, there is 2 contribution, country-wise contribution. We saw this country-wise contribution. This is the 2021, this country-wise contribution. And very latest contribution is the sector-wise contribution. We saw there is a 20% agriculture contribute for the climate emissions, greenhouse gas emissions. But this is most of the case, I think it will be highest 8% for the life-saving causes and other for industrial agriculture. Would we like to know? But through this intervention, lot of people are now facing the problem, especially the low-lying country, island country, coastal country, and rich country also if there is the poor people. Because poor always the poor, because their education is poor, their lifestyle is poor, the poor people. Due to lot of causes, there is 2 disasters. We need to, Sloan said we would like to address Sloan said. Because so day by day, within 10 years, a farmer become a poor and huge loan, and he bound to go to nearby city. And we talk about this chain, the displacement. Sometimes we talk about the displacement for the political or social issues. Sometimes we say the disaster. But end of the day now we talk about the climate-induced displacement. If I saw a small statistics, which from the last year, IDMC, in the South Asia also, there is in Bangladesh, if we mention in the Bangladesh, there is only 560 people they displaced for the political or social. But 15 million people also displaced for the natural disaster as well as climate change. If I show another small information, only 7% of the land in South Asia, but 25% people all over the world live in the South Asia. This is created another big risk, the social risks and other risks also. Only 25% area land mass, but over total population is 25% in South Asia, only 11 countries also. So we need to consider these issues when we calculate the vulnerabilities and loss and damage and others issues, especially the finance. We talk about this next slide. And where they go? Most of the people go in nearby city and they're losing their everything. If I saw this, there will lot of, they have lost at first their housing, their food, their basic service delivery. When the shelter in the city authority have not to provide their all support. This is quite impossible, especially the South Asian countries and very especially the Bangladesh. So we saw that there is a lot of people that suddenly lost their skilled occupation and they become an unskilled labor in the city. And this is very challenging for this family to coping the new issues. They lost their education, medical, and their freedom of mobility, speech, and their home, and their nature, everything. And after that, they go to the big city, the mega city. When they go to the mega city, he need to repay the loan. And that's why they need a problem. And that's why he or she or those of family, they sell their property and asset. And this case, when they earn some money against their property and asset, and recently he going to the trap, sometimes the human trafficking. And most of the case we saw this a very vulnerable occupation they are involved. This women, child, and youth people also. And most of the case they are involved with the unlawful activities, indirectly or indirectly, at the enforce of the other social influential people. So in this area, their life is very inhuman life. But there another area, the cosmopolitan city. We have no idea, no data in what the villages are after 10 years. When they go to the cosmopolitan city area, their family is broken, there is no education. I don't know what happened there. There is no information personally for me and my organization also. So there is a lot of problem they're facing. But question is that if we say here, we are together here for the climate conference, this is the 28th climate conference. With all conference, we are learning lot of things and lot of also commitment also. And the last 6 December, there is a new meeting also, a new decision come to know. The Global Decarbonization Accelerator. This is a fantastic decision at this moment. But previously, we also saw the separate fantastic or useful or honoring for a lot of decision and commitments also. In 30 November, we come to know about the big achievement of the civil society. Now we are very happy about the create on the loss and damage fund, and few rich countries also already contribute the fund also, they committed. But before that, there's a lot of commitment there. If we go to the back, in 1997, the Paris Agreement, there's fantastic our achievement. Fantastic achievement for all over the civil society people. There is the next one country, they commit there, they will compensate because they are destroy the environment. After that, we come to know in 2000 in COP7, now we need the adaptation. Yes, why this adaptation? There's a lot of commitment there, lot of things there, but what's the reality? Then we come to Bali to Copenhagen. There is a lot of journey. And after that, we forget everything. A new area is what is this? This is the Paris Agreement. After that, Paris Agreement is Paris Rule Book. And last Glasgow COP, we are at another achievement. This achievement for the poor people who are the innocent sufferer. There is a new achievement. What's the achievement? Yes, $100 billion. Last 2009 to 2021, we come together and same language, trillion, 1,000 billion US dollar for poor people who are the loser. But what's the reality? At this moment, we would like to say that as the grassroots people, we route to the destination, routes to destination, this big circle, sufferer are the people. But we would like to see there is a lot of issues, lot of policies globally also. Our Ramsar Convention. Strictly we follow the Ramsar Convention, all wetland and river canal are obviously it will be conserved for the environmental lens. If we go to CBD, conservation biodiversity, they have all rights through this CBD. We can conserve our environment, our ecology, our biodiversity. But why these policies? And the Paris Agreement also, and a lot of commitment also. But I would like to say that all humans have the right to food, their shelter, their basic service, their health, all are defined in 1948 and by the Universal Human Rights, especially 25 clause. So we like to say we need to consider the human rights views for the climate vulnerable people. They have rights. That's why we'd like to say climate justice is human rights. Climate justice is human rights. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you. I do not have the authority to comment on your final slide, but having been involved in climate change negotiation for a long, long time, I do not foresee that funds will be moving very quickly, especially on loss and damage. The basic definition of loss and damage, what makes it loss and damage, how far is adaptation, what is beyond adaptation, these things have not been worked out. Who is going to disburse, in what method? As for example, similarly, the global target on mitigation is somewhat there, but on adaptation, nothing is happening. So how the countries would adapt, and if they cannot adapt, they should get support through loss and damage mechanism. A lot of fundamental work has to be done. It's not going to be very easy. That's the only caution I would like to make. Your approach is all right. The location from where the people are being displaced and moving out, and where they are being located after displacement, these two areas should be very carefully evaluated. With this, let me invite Anju Sharma. She is currently working with the Global Center on Adaptation as the global lead, has lots of professional experience working with SEI and UNDP and UNFCCC Secretariat. Anjuji, you have the floor.
Thank you, Envoy. I know we're running short of time, so I'll keep my intervention short. As Ainun said, I work for the Global Center on Adaptation.
Sorry, I made a mistake. Okay.
And I lead the program on locally led adaptation. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the GCA, so I'll give you a bit of a background. It's a relatively new organization. We were set up after the Global Commission on Adaptation delivered its report in 2018 to deliver on its mandate. So our programs follow closely the key issues that were described by the Global Commission. So we have food security, we have infrastructure, we have water, urban, youth, climate finance, and locally led runs across programs. So our work on locally led adaptation started last year, and our first area of focus has been Africa. So we have a flagship program there called the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program, AAAP. And so basically for us, when the organization was being set up, it was to see where can we bring value addition. For sure, there was a big hole in the institutional architecture globally that there wasn't really an organization that was focused entirely on adaptation. But I mean, where could we add value that other people were not doing? Because there's already so much going on. And the AAAP, essentially what we do is that we support IFIs, international financial institutions, early on during project design to embed adaptation in it. So in the context of LLA, for instance, what we do is that we come in there and we support them in engaging with communities, giving the communities a chance to understand their own vulnerabilities, come up with plans and priorities, and then influence the project design or the investments that the IFIs make. So last year, we started our work in Bangladesh, and we had a global hub on locally led adaptation that was established by the Prime Minister, Her Excellency Sheikh Hasina. And obviously, I mean, when we arrived in Bangladesh, an issue that was, you know, it is a big issue, is going to become a bigger issue, is that of climate migration. And that's clear to see, particularly in the capital city, where most of the migrants, when they come, they go to urban informal settlements. And these are highly, highly vulnerable to climate change. They have no risk-reducing infrastructure. There are already sort of deficits in public services that make, and other social vulnerabilities that make people more vulnerable. So that we wanted that to be our focus, and we spoke to Salim, Ainun mentioned, and we spoke to BRAC, the two organizations that, well, BRAC has a lot of experience working on the ground. And what we were advised was that we should work not in Dhaka, but actually in secondary cities. Because the problem was that everybody comes to Dhaka. Everybody comes to the capital city. All migrants sort of tend to, you know, mostly come to Dhaka. So what we started a project with BRAC called the Climate Resilient Migrant Friendly Cities, Secondary Cities Project. So the focus of the project essentially is to work with the mayors in secondary cities to you know, have a forward-looking view when they do their planning, to engage with local communities very, very closely. We follow there a methodology that's been pioneered by Slum Dwellers International around the world. It you know, literally sort of goes down to the household level. People are engaged. They have the knowledge, the information that they need about climate impacts, how it's going to affect them. They come up with plans. So there's a planning process that takes place locally. We started in Mongla, the place that was already mentioned, because this was an area where we knew, well, it already attracts a lot of migrants because it's got a port. But the migrants have, again, they don't have public services and housing, etc., end up living in informal settlements that are highly vulnerable. And we knew that this was going to increase exponentially because there was the new Padma Bridge that was being built that would connect Mongla to Dhaka. So that's, and the mayor was very, very supportive and sort of willing to work with us. So that's the first place that we worked in, and we basically started off with local adaptation. So the first thing we did was sort of do a rapid profiling of informal settlements to identify about 20 that were the most vulnerable in Mongla. In the 20 most vulnerable, we did this more detailed enumeration process that SDI does, and developed local adaptation plans. These will now be aggregated to ward level plans and then town level plans. So the idea is that you make sure that you capture the breadth of the priorities of poor communities, and then you escalate it. Because in Mongla, for instance, what happens is that you have the municipality and you have the port authority. And the port authority benefits a lot because all the migrants work for them, but they don't essentially contribute. So the mayor, that for him is a point of annoyance that he's left to deal with the providing services to the workers, but he doesn't necessarily get to engage. So it's basically to try and sort of widen the circle, bring in the port authority, get them to see how much they benefit, hopefully convince them that they also need to have a role in supporting the migrants that come in. So I mean, for us, so right now, because we've just started work, our focus is very much on destination. But we're very aware that there's also a job to be done at source. And clearly, I mean, on the one hand, in South Asia, I think in many parts of the world, migration is an adaptation strategy. It's a coping strategy. So if a crop fails, if people don't have work during certain lean periods, they tend to migrate to where they hope they'll find jobs. So you can already cut that down if you provide support at source. If there's an emergency, if crops fail, if they have immediate assistance, it's unlikely then that they move. Sometimes it's also possible after they've moved and the situation improves back home, they can go back. But in some cases, like Ainun was mentioning, where there are these severe salinity, really, really severe water shortage problems, it's simply not possible to go back. So we have to sort of come to terms with the fact that there will be this migration. We have to prepare secondary cities and primary cities to deal with it. And in fact, it could be an economic opportunity for these cities, because if the cities are prepared, they could actually help to grow the economy of the city. So we started in Mongla. Now we are working with another ADB project. It's the Coastal Towns Climate Resilience Project. And there we have 3 other cities that we've taken on. The idea is to sort of spread across, but make it very, very locally driven. So our first point of engagement is with the communities and with the mayors, because that connection is very critical to make, that the government, the local government and the municipality, the mayors, works with the communities, that they are talking to each other, that there is that understanding going on. And then, of course, the link to funds, which we make through our collaboration with IFIs. So I'll just stick to that very briefly, and if there are questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Anjuji. I more or less agree with the points that you made. There must be support given to the people before they move out and also to where the community move in. And the host community is often upset because the migrants, the people who have come in, receive support from international organizations. On the other hand, the host community feels that they are being deprived. And also the new community that has come in, they do not have any belongingness to that particular area, to particular community or city. And therefore they destroy, as we heard from Uganda. Also the other thing is the local market of the payment to be received on selling labor goes down. So the new people who come in, they are ready to sell their labor at a much lower price, where the local host community becomes very angry and upset. So it is also a big task for the managers, the government officers who manage it, to prevent any scuffle or fight between the host community and the migrants who have come in. I'm looking at my watch. I have still 14 minutes to go. So as I said at the beginning, this could be allocated for questions. If it is question, fire it straight. Or if you want to make a comment or observation, you are free to do that. Then it will not be anybody's responsibility to answer to your comment. The house is open, the floor is open, over there. Okay.
Thank you. My name is Chase Ford. I'm a law student at Vermont Law School in the United States, but I'm here at COP as a party to Micronesia. Thank you all for the panel. In thinking through some of the things mentioned, such as definitions or integrating a more human rights approach to displacement, what aspects of the international or national legal landscape needs to change to better intervene to help those who are displaced by climate?
Thank you. So you want somebody to respond to this question, your points?
Yes, please, and whoever feels they are most
Okay, so we take note of your feeling and your ideas. Thank you. Anybody else over here?
Thank you and good evening to all of the speakers that you have finally presented some of the issues that actually representing the climate refugee. I'm Hossain from Bangladesh and I'm also part of the civil society groups. My question is that all of we are thinking about that putting the people first in any kind of initiatives. But how could we do it? I mean, we're putting climate refugee, we're bringing the, making the government accountable and talking many issues like putting different kinds of projects like 3-4 years. So how could we manage this issue when we talk about the putting people first? Any of you? Thank you.
I'm happy to take that.
Okay, anyone from this side want to take this question?
I can take the second one.
Please. Anju.
Yeah, so I mean, I can describe to you a bit about the methodology, but if you go to the global hub, so actually, as I said, the Slum Dwellers International, they've developed this methodology. I think it was something that started in India, traveled to South Africa, went up, and then really took off in Kenya. And the reason for that was that Kenya had just passed a new constitution which actually devolved governance. So the county governments were responsive. So the community in Mukuru, this big informal settlement in Kenya, they had been, fighting the battle for land rights, for public services, etc., for a very long time. And they went to the county government and said, look, we want to make an upgradation plan. So we want to do a consultation process, come up with this. County government said yes. So it was in partnership that they did a plan, which, as I said, I mean, the way they organized themselves, it was literally down to the household level. 400,000 residents in Mukuru, no small matter. And also they did it in a way that was cross-sectoral. So all the small NGOs that were working in Mukuru, they got them together and said, push with us, right? So they became consortia in each of the sectors that they were specialists in. And then you had the conversation going vertically and horizontally. They came up with a people's plan, and that's what's inspired our people's adaptation plan. So we took that to Bangladesh and added learning. Because when we went there, they said secondary cities, and we said, hang on, that's what's happening in Africa. Everybody comes to the capital city. There's a job to be done in secondary cities, right? So there's that kind of cross-learning that's going on. We're doing it in Liberia. We're doing it in several other places. So, I mean, the main thing about that, the main lesson for us was, this should not necessarily be a process that's driven externally for a project. It has to be a process for the community, for them to understand their own climate vulnerability, and at the end of the day, whatever comes out is their data, is their information for them to use to negotiate with their governments or whoever, donors or whoever, right? So you've got to, through that process, build that strong ownership, that it's not, nobody is coming to help you, this is you understanding what your problems are, and then you have negotiating power with your governments. And they understood that really well in Mukuru. That was something, we had a meeting with the slum dwellers in Mumbai came to Mongla, and that was their main lesson to them, that, our strength is in being together, in solidarity. We have mechanisms that we've developed over 10 years that we can share with you on how you can negotiate better with your governments and with donors. So it's that kind of, networking and facilitating communities to come to grips with what climate change means to them that's critical.
I think it's a complex process. There are three parties, the hosts, the migrants, and the government. So each situation has to be analyzed, but of course the local people understands their situation best. But that was a good study. But in case of Bangladesh, when the Rohingyas have been moved in, the Rohingyas want to go back, and government of Bangladesh doesn't want them to stay here, also go back. But Myanmar would not allow that to happen. So over here, community-based adaptation program maybe has to be addressed in a different way, that many of these people would be here for many years. Their movement back to Myanmar is not going to be easy. Over here, okay, I think the lady first. I will give you the floor.
Hi everyone, thank you so much. My name is Lindsay and I'm a master's student at the University of Vermont.
Close exactly.
I also work on behalf of an organization called TWIN, Trans-Boundary Water and Cooperation Network, and I'm really interested in exploring perceptions of climate change and how hope is a driver for believing in climate solutions, but at the same time how there's conflict that can arise in certain communities through climate change, such as instances of migration. So my question is, do you think perception plays a role in conflict mitigation toward accepting climate migrations? And why do you think that is? And also, what role do you think hope plays in this context? Thank you.
Thank you for your observation over here. Okay. Please be brief.
Thank you very much. My name is Shakirul Islam and I'm from Bangladesh. I'm working with a grassroots migrant organization. So my questions may go to Ms. Annelisa from Paris City University, because you have done a study on the migration and asylum seekers. So we have conducted a research in the mangrove Sundarban areas, and we found that people are being forced to migrate in the context of climate change. And yes, when we are talking about displacement and internal migration, but our research actually find that a certain amount of people are migrating internationally. And as you know, majority of them are coming to the traditional labor destination countries, particularly in Middle East and Malaysia, Singapore and other countries, but there are also a trend of irregular migration from Bangladesh to Europe through Mediterranean Sea, and many of the cases that the people from that mangrove area are traveling to this route, and they are falling into the trap of human trafficking, forced labor and other types of human rights violation. So my question is whether you are thinking to investigate more to find the link between migration, irregular migration from climate-induced area, particularly in Bangladesh and other countries in South Asia. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is more or less an observation. The people whom you identify who are moving out to Europe and others, to me, they are mostly economic migrant. It will be very difficult to establish that they are moving out only because of climatic events. Climatic event is still in infancy. Give another 10 years, then it will be a serious issue. But ma'am, you want to respond?
I want to thank you for these comments. That's really really important. I don't know, perhaps also want to add something.
Maybe I just wanted to address a comment on the question that you raised a bit earlier about the legal frameworks and legal mechanism. I think that we often have a tendency to think of climate-induced migration as a kind of uniform phenomenon that would affect all countries globally and that would therefore require a global answer. I think that while it is important that global frameworks such as the stocktaking of the Paris Agreement or other legal frameworks as those that we discuss in these negotiations are in place and recognize the role of migration and displacement, I think that when it comes to the protection of the people and to the responses, those will need to be extremely contextual, because the need of the people displaced in South Asia might not be the same as the needs of the people displaced in Central America. And that therefore, I think it is crucial that we incorporate also this local dimension of climate-induced migration also in the legal responses, and that we don't think that there will be at some point one legal silver bullet that will fix the problem.
Thank you. Mr. Kabongo, would you like to make some statement?
Just still on the legal perspective, just to add on. I think at the global level, he has talked about it, but at the lower levels, we need to think about policy making at the national level, because also that's where issues are coming from, but also engaging policy making at the lower local governments, decentralized kind of, look at states, districts, sub-counties, counties. There's a lot which can be done there to safeguard the migrants and also the refugee-related aspects. And lastly, of course, using the human rights approach at all levels in whatever we do. Thank you.
Thank you. I think let's bring the program to a close, but before that, I would like to give the designated speakers from here if they want to make any. Shamim, you have 1 minute.
Sir, I think we have any time? How many time? I think no need to explain time. 1 minute only. So thanks to everybody and our colleagues.
I have these cards for you, so visit the Global Hub for more information. Thank you.
And Mr.
Yeah, just hoping for Afghanistan inclusion and